Okay, Ken, I think we've got to the point now where we should try and have a bit of a retrospective, look at where we've gone, where we started, and where we've got to, and then give a little bit of a kind of a peek into what we think we're going to be doing from now on.
So quick recap?
Yeah, just give a quick recap of the way you see it.
Okay, key problem. Relatively scarce stock of resources. So land, labour, capital, entrepreneurial ability, never ever abundant enough for our needs. Yeah. Therefore, we need to make decisions. What are we going to produce? How are we going to produce it? How much, etc., and for whom? Who's going to get the goodies? And every country, remember, faces this problem.
Needs a system.
Right? It needs a system. So at our extreme, we can either have a totally laissez-faire capitalist economy, or we can have a totally governed, centrally planned economy. And of course, in reality, anywhere between the two extremes. So
it's possible, yes.
Yeah. So we've got some market socialist economies,
yes,
and we've got the essentially market economies such as ours and the North Americas, etc., and the countries of Eastern Europe and the old and North Korea is centrally planned, but same problem.
Still got a scarcity out.
Exactly. So in our case, the market economy is our dominant allocative and distributive mechanism. So resources essentially go where consumers want them to go, if you like, because when there's, for example, as you've shown in your videos, when there's an increase in demand, prices rise. It sends out a little signal to producers to bring your resources this way, and of course we see those resources going to a higher level of supply, so land, labour and capital are shifted into that area of production. So we sometimes call that consumer sovereignty. It's a little bit of an insight into, remember Adam Smith?
Yes.
The invisible hand where resources are guided
by these price signals.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
There's no government directive saying this is where resources must go.
And so the essential thing here is that markets contain supply and demand forces, which in a sense embody the wishes on the one hand of consumers, and on the other hand the wishes of suppliers who are driven by profits. And so when the market price is determined, there's a unique price at which both the wishes of consumers are met by the wishes of producers. And any other price we saw in another video means that there's a dislocation between those supply and demand forces,
as you've explained,
surpluses and shortages.
So when we, and one of the key things we need to recognise that there are a number of what we call non-price determinants of supply and non-price determinants of demand. So you can get that demand shifting, changes in income and taste and preferences, or population changes, etc.
Yes.
And from the supply side, we've seen it just recently. We've had fantastic rains here, as they've had in North America, and already the prediction is of a bumper crop. So there'll be a rightward shift of our supply curve.
Because farmers have got to move resources to harvest that crop.
Absolutely.
Truckers have to come in and move to the markets. And so there is this allocation of land, labour and capital to where the prices are predicted.
And of course, intriguingly, in those commodity markets for agricultural products, we might actually see, even though it's a boom theoretically for farmers, that their prices will fall. And we've seen with our latest videos that there's an impact therefore on total revenue. So it's an intriguing field of study where you've got that dynamics of forces.
That's right. So where we want to go now is to point out that markets sometimes don't work exactly in that very fluid and invisible hand way, that sometimes governments see it that they have to interfere in the operation of the market for one reason or another. For instance, in the provision of food or in the provision of housing,
And in both those examples, we'll look at the government intervening and actually putting a ceiling or a cap.
A cap.
And saying,
Exactly.
look, the market forces have created this price and we think it's inequitable. We don't like it. So,
Yes.
and of course, contrarily, they might say, well, the returns being generated in this industry for the people involved in it are insufficient. And actually give them support by putting in a minimum price or a floor price.
Floor price, yes.
Yeah, intriguing.
Okay. So what happens then is they artificially create these surpluses and shortages and prevent the market from equilibrating.
And it actually poses a whole set of problems in itself.
Exactly. And a whole bunch of behaviours on the part of consumers and suppliers,
Correct.
which once you learn economics are pretty kind of obvious, but may not be so obvious to governments who have got political and other agendas in mind in order to bring about these caps or these floor prices.
I think we need to actually look at those two examples we've talked about in detail.
Okay,
We need to model it on the whiteboard.
we will.
Okay, mate.
Fantastic.
No worries.